Expansion is visible, but containment remains. The hourly boundary defines space. The lower time frame defines behavior. Interaction must persist to extend. On the 1H chart, the February 19th New York session anchor formed beneath the 20 moving average. It developed after price moved outside the February 18th Asia session anchor. That formation occurred near the lower half of the 20 Bollinger Band structure. At that moment, structural weight remained overhead. The 20 MA was still above the session anchor body. Volatility was compressed relative to earlier relocation attempts. Instead of moving lower toward the upper boundary of the February 5th Asia anchor, price stabilized along the lower 20 Bollinger Band. The lower band acted as a volatility floor. Compression developed through repeated interaction rather than rejection. Persistence followed. From that compression, price began engaging successive lower session references. First, it moved through the lower boundary of the February 18th Asia session anchor. Then it interacted with the lower boundary of the February 11th New York session anchor. The sequence was progressive. There was no sharp rejection. Each boundary was processed through duration. The 20 MA on the hourly chart began flattening during that engagement. Distance between price and the moving average narrowed. Volatility contraction shifted into gradual expansion. As price reclaimed the February 18th New York session lower boundary, structural containment shifted. The prior outside condition transitioned into internal negotiation. Relocation back into the session box became visible. Inside that box, movement extended toward the upper half, not through acceleration, through repeated small-bodied candles. Volatility was not explosive. It was redistributing. The February 19th Asia session anchor then formed above the 20 MA. Its body positioned near the midpoint of the February 18th New York session range. This shifted the hourly slope dynamic. The 20 MA turned upward. Slope increased gradually. Distance expanded slowly. The band structure began to widen asymmetrically. Price repeatedly tested the lower boundary of the February 17th Asia session anchor. Those tests did not produce rejection. They produced absorption. After multiple engagements, that boundary gave way through persistence. Continuation followed not as expansion, but as structural carry. The upper boundary of that Asia anchor was then processed. Once cleared, price approached the 120 moving average. The 120 MA had been overhead structural weight. Interaction occurred through gradual overlap. There was no immediate rejection. The 20 Bollinger upper band began expanding. The lower band stopped widening. Asymmetry appeared. The 4 Bollinger structure on the hourly chart compressed on the lower side. The upper 4 band widened. Short-term volatility shifted upward. Above current candles, 2 session boundaries overlap. The February 17th New York session upper boundary aligns closely with the February 16th New York session lower boundary. This creates layered resistance memory. Price is currently negotiating beneath that overlap. Expansion is visible. Containment still exists. Volatility is widening upward. Lower bands are stabilizing. Session memory remains active. Processing continues inside structural overlap. Volatility is shifting inside a prior hourly range. The session anchor remains intact. Lower timeframe movement negotiates around it. Persistence determines duration. The hourly structure has relocated back into the February 18th New York session box. That box now defines containment. All movement since reclaiming the lower boundary has occurred within it. The slope of the 20 MA on the hourly chart is now upward. It is not steep. It is progressively increasing. Distance between price and the 20 MA has widened modestly. This widening reflects acceptance, not acceleration. Acceptance is defined by duration above the average. The 120 MA interaction was gradual. Candles overlapped it before clearing. There was no immediate displacement. That overlap matters. When price overlaps a higher timeframe moving average without rejection, structural weight shifts. It does not disappear. It redistributes. The 20 Bollinger bands are widening upward. The lower band has stopped expanding. Compression on the lower side indicates reduced downside volatility. Expansion is now directional in volatility terms, not directional in outcome terms. Flatness persists in segments. Several hourly candles formed with limited range. Upper wicks remained controlled. Bodies remained moderate. This flat block matters. Compression dominates briefly. Then expansion resumes. On the RSI layer, regime has shifted above midline. Slope is upward. Speed is moderate. There is no spike condition. There is density. Now focus on structural overlap above. The February 17th New York session upper boundary sits near current highs. The February 16th New York session lower boundary sits just above it. These two levels compress structural space. Compression near overlapping anchors often extends duration. It does not guarantee relocation. It defines processing. Distance mechanics are important here. As price moves away from the lower boundary of the February 18th New York session anchor, the distance increases slowly. There is no vertical separation. There is layered climb. The 20 MA continues rising beneath price. The 120 MA now sits slightly below recent candles. This inversion reduces immediate structural pressure. Still, overlap above contains. Volatility expansion is occurring inside containment. This is a key distinction. Expansion without relocation remains negotiation. Several hourly candles have closed near upper band proximity. Upper 20 Bollinger contact has occurred. Continuation has not accelerated. Flatness returns intermittently. 3 consecutive candles formed with overlapping bodies. Upper shadows remained shallow. Lower shadows held above the 20 MA. This block reflects stabilization. The structure is not breaking outward. It is stabilizing near memory. Processing is layered. Lower time frame fluctuations are occurring inside this hourly containment. But the boundary remains the February 18th New York session box. Until that box is left through duration, containment governs. Volatility is active. Slope is upward. Overlap persists. Structure continues to negotiate within layered session memory. Structure has not relocated. It is being tested. The 1H range holds structural weight. The 15M layer fluctuates within it. Compression precedes transition. On the 15-minute chart, price action mirrors the hourly relocation but with greater amplitude. After the February 19th Asia session anchor formed above the 20 MA on 1H, the 15M layer began repeatedly engaging the lower boundary of the February 17th Asia session anchor. Those retests were frequent. They did not produce sustained rejection. They produced gradual clearance. Once cleared, the 15M candles expanded toward the upper hourly band region. The 120 MA on 15M was approached and then crossed. Overlap preceded continuation. The 4 Bollinger Bands on 15M widened aggressively during that move. Upper band expanded. Lower band contracted. This asymmetry reflects short-term volatility dominance. However, after the initial expansion, compression returned. Several 15M candles formed inside a narrow range just beneath the overlapping February 17th and February 16th New York boundaries visible on 1H. Bodies narrowed. Wicks shortened. Flatness dominates briefly. The 20 MA on 15M is rising. Slope is moderate. Distance between price and the 20 MA fluctuates. When distance widens too quickly, candles retrace toward the average. When distance compresses, expansion resumes gradually. This oscillation is structural breathing. The 20 Bollinger Bands on 15M remain expanded. Upper band slopes upward. Lower band slopes upward, but more slowly. The 4 Bollinger structure compresses on pullbacks. It expands on pushes. This cyclical rhythm reflects intraday redistribution. Above current 15M candles, the overlapping hourly session boundaries remain intact. Interaction with that overlap has produced hesitation, not rejection. RSI on 15M remains above midline. Slope is flattening slightly. Momentum is stabilizing rather than accelerating. Containment from 1H defines the field. 15M behavior defines negotiation inside that field. No contradiction exists. Short-term expansion occurs. Then compression follows. Then minor expansion resumes. This repetition builds duration near structural memory. The 20MA on 1H continues rising beneath the entire 15M fluctuation. The 120MA remains recently cleared on both layers. Distance remains modest. Volatility is expanding upward asymmetrically. Lower band compression persists. Upper band expansion continues cautiously. The structure is not accelerating vertically. It is climbing in layers. Session memory above remains active. Overlap has not yet been displaced through duration. Engagement continues beneath it. Price is processing near overlapping session anchors, while volatility redistributes inside the hourly containment.